Hey, it's your boy JC. Welcome to episode 71 of the 72 of the Dream10X podcast. And we're here sitting in front of a nice cozy fire. I'm wearing a hat that I got from my daughter for Christmas. She made this herself. And this is the coolest, warmest hat I've ever had in my life.
It's pretty amazing.
It is very
It's a gorgeous color. She did a beautiful job on the crocheting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this week we are talking about my wife's dissertation, her PhD dissertation.
I am dangerously overeducated.
And it's called Daring the Sea, Exploring Aesthetic Experiences in Prolonged Extreme Natural Environments, which reconnect individuals to the ecosystem. That title is a book in and of itself, actually.
Yeah, that's typical of dissertation. There are some parameters that make dissertations kind of hard to read.
So I'm really glad that I read this now. How long has it been?
2019.
4 years after you wrote it? 5
Yeah,
years?
so I defended in January. Actually, it's December 2019 because it was right after our wedding.
She wanted me to read it to critique it for spelling and grammatical errors and all that, and I'm really glad I didn't do that. And I'm really glad that I just got to sit and read it in a relaxed way and just appreciate it after the fact and after hearing her talk about her ideas and
Well, we should let him know how this all came to fruition.
and her stuff for so long. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we were sitting at I think we were sitting at the table. No, we were sitting downstairs because you were reading your book. And he was talking about one of the books that he'd read and talking about his experience at the land. And he said, I think I had this amazing connection to nature. And he said some things. I'm like, yeah, that's chapter 3 of my dissertation. He kept going on. Yeah, that's chapter 4 of my dissertation. He's like, I guess I should read your dissertation.
When was that? I don't remember what you're talking about.
It was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Just recently, yeah. Yeah, so in the last episode of this podcast, we talked about Mr. Fukuoka's book, One Straw Revolution, which is basically how to be a lazy farmer in very succinct terms. And before that, we talked about the importance of seeds to humanity and agriculture and human life in Enduring Seeds by Gary Paul Nabhan. And so I thought it was quite appropriate that now we talk about your dissertation, which is about how humans get connected with nature and how we build that relationship back with nature, since we've been so far removed from it for so long, right? Basically. So there's some terms in here that I think it'd be helpful to define real quick. Biophilia. I have heard the word biophilia ever since I've known Dr. Caple, and I feel like I should have an intimate biophilia relationship with the word. Basically, biophilia means a love of nature. So if you feel really good or loving towards certain aspects of nature, you're experiencing biophilia to some degree. Now, conversely, if you're afraid of being in nature, you experience
fear of nature. So biophilia was coined by by E.O. Wilson, and yep, and as was biophobia.
Biophobia is the fear of nature, and it's kind of like the yin and yang of our relationship with the outdoors. I think it's
like spiders, trees,
Yeah, yeah.
It's innate. It's innate connection. It's innate versus intentional at that point. Like the
what does that mean?
So it's innate. It's like who we are as humans. Like, so we have this innate connection with flowering plants in the spring. It's super exciting. We all the spring's coming out. We see flowering plants. And that connects back to our ancestries, our evolutionary ancestors, who flowering plants meant food. And so it's more that biophilia is that innate connection to nature. Biophobia is that innate fear of nature. So, for example, spiders. Well, there are a lot of poisonous spiders that can kill you, a lot of poisonous snakes, and that is translated through, again, the evolutionary, because our amygdala is trained to keep us alive, and so that's our amygdala response to the natural environment. Okay, continue.
A little bit of a rabbit hole on that. So with the flowering plants, I learned from Enduring Seeds book that way back in the history of mankind, way back in the history of nature, there were more gymnosperms plants, which were not flowering, but like I don't know. I gotta look up the definition of gymnosperm actually, but I don't think they were flowering plants. They were like pine trees and those kinds of plants that didn't have flowers.
Interesting. Okay.
And then as nature evolved, they became more. There became more and more flowering plants, which were the I just lost the thought.
We
It
can
was
look it up.
angiosperms and gymnosperms, I think.
Okay.
I think those were the flowering plants. I gotta look it up, look up the terms exactly. I'll put it in the notes on this, but I think it was gymnosperms. But flowering plants were like the big revolution of flora back in the evolutionary cycle of flora, because now you could have pollinators come in and spread the genetic material of plants further and farther afield.
Yeah.
Which allowed them to flourish a lot more and produce fruit. And so we humans started, loving flowering plants, like you said, because of the fruit producing capabilities of them. Angiosperms versus gymnosperms.
Cool.
I think that's correct. I'm not a biologist, but but so I thought that was really, there's a lot more to that, I think. And it'd be interesting to kind of research that a little bit more about how the evolution of flora impacted the diversity of life in the world and got even humanity more involved and happy about food and being in nature and stuff.
So I have some books downstairs.
I'm sure you do.
On biocultural evolution, which is kind of what you're talking about.
That's another term.
Yep. And so bioculture, do you want me to explain it or you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh.
So biocultural evolution is how culture and biology have impacted one another, and that's exactly what you talked about.
How
So
culture and biology have impacted one another.
Yep. And so, for example, we don't have fur on our skin. We have a little bit of light hair because we learned how to kill animals and use their skin for fur. And so, not having fur on our skin, what's that?
For warmth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, not having fur on our skin enables us to be more nomadic creatures too. And so, culturally, now we can be more nomadic because this is
More
mobile, exactly. So there's
More
a lot
agile.
of different examples of it, of how biology and culture impact how we operate. But there's a couple books by Caple and Kaplan that are really good and studies around that downstairs.
I was going to say the definition of the phrase biocultural evolution was probably the most important aspect that I took out of that.
Oh, good.
It's the most powerful meaning, I think. The most powerful thing around it. Well, this is really hot in front of this fireplace. So yeah, biocultural evolution.
Cultural revolution.
What was it? Eco-consciousness.
Eco-consciousness, yes. Describe eco-consciousness in your words.
Eco-consciousness basically is our awareness of the interconnectedness of things in nature.
Bateson would be so proud.
So Dewey and Bateson were two authors. What are they? Philosophers, biologists? What were they? What would you say?
Yeah. So Bateson was a anthropologist.
Anthropologist.
Yep. And philosopher too. Yes. And then Dewey was also he was more of a philosopher, but he also was more of an education type of focus versus the anthropology.
Learning.
So Dewey really studied our brain and how we learn essentially. And so he has lots of great books on that, including one how he talks about how to connect to nature through learning. So that's just a whole lot of awesome. And then Bateson was all about the pattern that connects. So what we are connected to one another, but what does that look like in the why behind it? And he has amazing books, and The Mind in Nature is my favorite. And again, like how we're disconnected to nature and why is that? And so exploring that. And that's been many, many years since. And so it's cool to take the work that they did and build on their foundations to experience what we have today and figure out how to reconnect.
That theme is very prominent in the last two books we talked about on here as well, Enduring Seeds and One Straw Revolution, the interconnectedness of things and our awareness of that, our appreciation of that, and how we need to become more aware of that and leverage our awareness to help improve the world and food and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So first of all, I wanted to point out that my dad read her early renditions of this, right, when it was coming out, and so to see your thanks in there was very meaningful for me. Right before he passed away, and then your dad read it as well.
My dad is the only person to have read it cover to cover in its final state, other than my chair and my committee. So.
Yeah, and neither one of our dads are here anymore, so it was really nice to. This is such a. She put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this. So much money went into this. So much time, and man, when I read it, I was like, man, this is really sweet. This is a really nice thing that you've written, and I know how much work you put into that, and I'm really glad that I read it. And,
yay!
man, just so much stress in our lives as you were working on it, and it really is a nice dissertation. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
So thank you.
That's
Thank
meaningful.
you for writing it and for all the nice things you said in it. And it also had a lot to do with what was going on in our lives at the time, because you made it part of our lives at the time. But before we get into that, basically the idea of the dissertation is that people who the hypothesis was to identify how we are impacted, how we improve our biophilia, our love of nature by spending prolonged periods of time in nature, essentially, right?
So it's versus hypothesis, that's a statistical study or a quantitative study. I did a qualitative study, so it's more exploring whether and how.
Right.
Yeah.
And so building on the works of Dewey and Bateson, who had posited that, right?
Yes.
They had already made that claim that by spending time in nature, you improve your appreciation, your biophilia, you build that up. But your nuance that you wanted to answer in this was, well, how?
Yeah.
How is that improved?
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about how you approached talking about the how.
So, all right. Well, in doing the study, I had to find people who'd been in nature for an extended period of time. So I connected the ocean road to it because we were about to embark on this crazy journey, which was so amazing, from Cape Cod to Ireland. And so I was going to do a self-study around this and study my own experiences and what happened and whether or not I had an aesthetic experience. That's another term we need to define. Aesthetic experience. What's an aesthetic experience?
When you have aesthetics is appreciation of beauty, some beautiful sense that you have either looking at something or some feeling that you have from your surroundings or something like that. Right?
That's close. Yeah. That's good. That's a good definition. And it's a sense of awe a sense of awe. Like, so you're in nature and all of a sudden, or you're looking at a painting, or you're listening to a piece of music and you get this feeling of overwhelm, this feeling of awe, this feeling you just can't duplicate, but it's just, wow, a really intense emotional response is a way that I guess Dewey would describe it, to looking at something that's beautiful. And beauty's all determined, but if we go to Kant's perspective, but something that's beautiful to you, whatever's meaningful for you. And so again, art, music, theater, nature.
And so when you have a strong aesthetic experience like that, you want more of it because it gives you like a dopamine hit almost. It's like I don't know, right? It's like a certain visceral feeling that you have and you want more of it.
It's like listening to the same piece of music over and over again because you just want that reaction again.
Yeah. So tying that to nature, when something like that happens to you in nature, you want more of that. And as you try to put yourself in a position to be closer in nature, to get more of that aesthetic experience, you build a relationship. It's kind of like being married. You know? You have an aesthetic relationship experience.
Yeah,
like,
we do.
Give me some more of that aesthetics.
So the ocean row, tying it all back, I had aesthetic experiences in nature before, and the ocean row, I was really looking forward to having something magnificent, and so needed to find. Why are you laughing?
What?
Okay.
Yeah,
and so I really wanted to build it into what I was researching, and so I went to find people who were people who had already been in nature for long periods of time, and I based it on Harbaugh and Samuelson's time in nature, which was 55 days. So that was a nice time frame to base it off of, because they were in nature that long, and that's what I was doing, so it was the whole thing. So I had to find people that had been in nature for at least 55 days, and I did. So I found people who'd climbed mountains, who'd rode oceans, who had climbed the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail. I tried to find an astronaut so bad, but I couldn't get any to hang out with me. And other people who had been in Antarctica and climbed to Mount Everest, and these just incredible long-term experiences, and interviewed them on what that felt like, what that looked like. One of the criteria was they'd had to have had an aesthetic experience. What I found was not all of their aesthetic experiences were in their 60-day requirement, which was interesting. What a lot of them said was something completely different, even though that this is what the requirement and what we wanted to study. So
one of the things I took out of here is one of the reasons you needed to have a similar exposure in nature was so as a researcher, you could have empathy and understanding for the people that you were studying.
Yes, exactly.
And so that didn't quite work out, right?
No, it didn't work out.
we set off on our adventure from Scituate, Massachusetts in our rowing boat with the hope of rowing all the way to Dingle, Ireland. And we only made it 3 days and 2 nights. And so
a lot happened in those 3 days and 2 nights.
You were very disappointed for more than one reason, and I thought, and we were just dating at the time, so I thought, oh, I don't know if
I was angry. I was very angry.
And I wasn't even thinking about her dissertation at the time. I was just thinking about my own, experience on the adventure and putting it all together and whatever. But what a huge failure that was for us to work out. And it was even more so for you because you had twice as much tied up into the adventure. Yeah. But I still think it was hugely valuable for what you were trying to accomplish with it. Just because being out there in the 3 days that we were, there was a lot of suffering and fear and struggle because we put ourselves out in nature. Yeah.
And a lot of joy. I mean, we saw all kinds of really cool animals.
A lot of joy too.
Sunsets and
I'd never experienced before.
Yeah.
And so it was a good mix of biophilia experiences and biophobia. Mostly biophobia. There was some times there I thought we were close to. I was like, I made a mistake. I put our lives in serious jeopardy out here. So that's a really big fear response to be, putting yourself out in nature.
Especially when we're so used to our houses and our comforts.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. I just remember, man, I just want to be comfortable again. Make me safe and comfortable again. I don't want to die. It's not why I'm out here. So so we experienced that. We went to the door of what it feels like to be close to dying when you put yourself in a purely natural environment. So I think that was a very important thing for you to experience as a researcher. Okay. You disagree?
I think no.
I mean, not intentionally, but I think it had a good. I would have thought it would have given you a good perspective. That's all I'm saying.
Definitely to help give me a perspective. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you interviewed 12 people, 12
Yes.
different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious why so you had requirements for who these people were that you interviewed. They had to be, certain thing. They had to do a certain thing for a certain amount of time.
Right.
60 days was like the cutoff,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you based it on the Harbo Samuelson 55 days across the Atlantic, which we have since, another rabbit hole, since we rode down the Potomac River, we're like, that's got to be a lie. There's no way they took all the food and water they needed to put in that little boat, the Fox, for 55 days. Ain't no way it happened.
Yeah,
Nope.
because in our Gunning Dory, we had the same size boat, and we had to refuel every few stops.
Every
no
few
matter,
days.
yeah.
There was no way you could carry that
Yep.
much water. Because, man, we were drinking a whole boatload of water every day almost.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy.
But anyway, maybe, I don't know. It just seems highly, after that, we're like, I don't know. But anyway, 55 days,
So,
okay.
and also 55 days is enough time to really disconnect. So you can go for a weekend, you can go for 30 days, but after about 60 days, like, you're out of society. You don't have those social pressures. You don't have your phone ringing all the time. You don't have all of these things in society that we're so used to. Those alarm clocks, everything else. So it's enough time to actually get out and away. Because studying the extreme, then we can bring it back to say, okay, how do we do this in our daily lives?
But I think from my own brain, I appreciate you had to create a framework for how to do this stuff.
Absolutely. It's cool.
But I don't think it's a necessity to build an aesthetic.
No.
Have an aesthetic experience in nature and to improve your biophilia and your eco-consciousness.
Agreed. And that's the conclusion. I mean, yeah.
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 So do you have anything else you want to say? Do you want
ahead.
to share anything about how how either the ocean row or some other experience you had helped build your eco-consciousness? Is it moving?
I think we're okay.
Okay, did you want to share a personal experience that would relate you to your...
So I think
study?
for me, it definitely has been over time, because I used to backpack by myself with my dogs, and I've just been in nature my whole life. That's been something that's very important to me, and I didn't realize that until I actually wrote this, that it was so important to me. I'm very sensitive to my environment and what's around me, and being in society makes me a little crazy. And so especially when way pre-James, again, take the dogs, get the heck out every weekend and go backpacking, or take a week and go backpacking, just to get away. And I had some pretty great experiences. One that I can remember, that I would call an aesthetic experience, is I got to the top of this mountain, and it was the quietest I'd ever been. And there was no bugs, which is weird, because I think it was in West Virginia at this point. I don't remember where. But yeah, there was no bugs. There was no sound. There was no deer. It was just a light, cloudy sky. It was just beautiful. And it was so quiet. And it was so peaceful. And to me, that was just, it's hard for me to find that sense of relaxation. And the second time, that was more recent, last time I was in Alaska, nothing overhead, no sound, no nothing. And that to me is so peaceful.
A lot of the people in your study comment on how sight, the colors are something that when they come back into society from extended period in nature, the colors don't seem as bright. They're used to, or they seem brighter or something.
So lights are brighter.
Huge, a lot more light, obviously, than you would find in nature.
And then the colors, so the one person who was at the John Muir Trail is like all gray. It's very granite based. And so when she got back, she was like, couldn't take all the colors around her were really bright. And then other people, like when they were, like the one woman who was in a random Pacific island doing some research on corals. I mean, the Pacific Island colors, she said, were just stunning and beautiful, and she felt like she'd never seen them before. And then when she got back to the U.S., the colors were muted. And so, how being in nature affects how you see things. Then you come back, and it's different. It's wildly different. So, that was a nice connection you just made.
Another thing was time.
Sense of time.
Yeah, how things just seem like some people commented on how they were, loving a scene of something, and hours seemed like minutes, and how time just you just seem to have so much more time. Things went so much slower. Like on the Appalachian Trail, things were so much slower, especially if you're just walking from Georgia all the way up to Maine. Things are going to be a lot slower. It's like that when you're on an ocean rowing boat. Things are so much slower. Things take so much slower. But then when you get back into society, things are just so fast, and they're just overwhelmed. Like when you come right in that punctuated equilibrium of back in the stream of screaming, 100 miles an hour.
Like the one person I remember, and I worked with this person, so it was interesting to see them before and after. And he had a really hard time when he got back from his excursion, where he had to, people had to go close themselves in rooms. So people either isolated themselves when they came back into society, and they isolated themselves in two different ways. One was literally shutting themselves out physically. And that was more the people who needed that physical break. And other people had already experienced that and were able to mentally create that blockage. So people who'd been in nature constantly, and come back and been in and out multiple times were mentally able to create that block, which I found so fascinating. I've been in nature a lot, but I haven't figured out that mental block. I still need a physical block.
One guy was a computer science professor. I thought I kind of related to him. He was kind of interesting. So he was an introvert, and he loved being in nature by himself. And he felt largely at home out there just by himself, exploring nature. And then when he came back, he was overwhelmed with how fast everything was going. But he found solace in talking with other people who enjoyed nature too.
The hero's journey.
Yeah. And so he became more of an extrovert with those types of people who could talk about their experiences in nature. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so I love that guy. He was amazing. And then he did so many really cool adventures in nature. And then, he was able to become less of the, in the hero's journey, I'm blanking. So not the hero anymore. He became the mentor and the educator. And yeah. And he loved that, so...
So I'll share one of my personal things recently. So one of the things I kind of disagreed with in here about was the extended period contiguous 60-day exposure to nature as a kind of a requirement for how to build eco-consciousness through an aesthetic experience. Because I have had brief excursions into nature just recently, within the last couple of years, just trying to pick up my hunting skills again. And so this year, I've tried bow hunting, and I've had an experience with a hawk on 3 different occasions that I've been out in the field.
That's so cool.
I don't know if it's the same hawk, but I'd like to think it was the same hawk. And the first time he landed on my deer blind, or she did, it was I think it's a northern harrier hawk, brown colored tail, really, really big bird. It looks like, I thought it was an owl at first because it had a kind of flat owl face. And it landed on my blind with some food in its talons. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, mock me for your hunting skills, And then as I'm trying to funnel around and get my camera and film it, it hears me. It didn't know I was in there, and it hops down and it looks right at me in the eyes on the ground. And I'm like, wow, that's a big bird, and it flew off. And then weeks later, I'm out there again, totally different place.
Wow.
This bird lands beside me. I can't see it because I got my blind shut and everything, but I'm hearing it, and I don't want to move because you're not supposed to move too much, but I can see it out of the corner of my eye, and it's just ripping the crap out of some prey that I caught. I don't know if it was a rabbit or what. And it's just like just
dinner, yummy.
Rip, and then I guess I hit something or moved a little bit, and it heard me, and it jumped up and it flew out in front of me and took off. And then the third time I'm out there, weeks later, totally different, not contiguous or anything. I'm done with the hunt and whatever, and I'm driving home. I'm just leaving the property. I'm coming out on the road, and this hawk comes right down in the middle of the road in front of my car. And so I speed up my car to catch up with it to see what it was, and it's that same color hawk. I don't know if it was the same hawk or not, but it was the same color hawk. and when I get up with my car on it, it flies off to the side right on my window, and he's looking right at me, right in my eyes as I'm driving
like,
with
dude.
it. And he flies up into a tree and he perches there and he watches me drive off.
Wow.
And 3 different times, this hawk, same type of hawk, this northern harrier hawk, same coloration, big guy, owl face looking, comes in contact with me, and I immediately think spirit animal. And I don't know what spirit animal is. I haven't really thought of it, but I know the term, and I've heard the term throughout my life. So I researched spirit animal. The Indians believe that if an animal contacts a person on multiple random occasions, then it could be your spirit animal, and it could be trying to tell you something. And I was like, man, that is cool. And so all of a sudden I have this biophilia, eco-consciousness feeling toward aesthetic experience. Like, wow, maybe this hawk is my spirit animal. Maybe it's trying to tell me something and about myself or about the universe or whatever. And just love it. Love nature, love being out there. And so that was a really a cool aesthetic experience for me to like meditate on that and what it might mean or whatever.
I love that.
And just to think back on it and how beautiful all those encounters were and how cool they were. That guy's mean looking badass hunter, and he's like looking at me, and I'm like, okay, I'll try to do better next time.
Oh my goodness.
But that as opposed to the phobia experience I had ocean rowing.
Yeah.
Like being out on that water and the experiences we went through and the storms and the ships and everything scared the crap out of me.
And with biophobia at the land too, like you don't like sleeping there by yourself.
And I don't.
Yeah.
I'm I keep waiting for Bigfoot or something to come in the tent. So
Yeah.
what my point of all this is saying that the combination of biophobia and biophilia helps build a greater aesthetic experience in nature.
Yeah.
Because you have a fear, you have an appreciation of what the power that's out there. It could be out there, and the grandness of it, and being out on the ocean, and how freaking ginormous and powerful it is relative to your little ocean rowing boat. It's awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's the yin and the yang, right? It's the combination of both that really help instill a greater appreciation for how great nature is and our role and our dependence on it.
Yeah, and exactly. And then what I found was from everybody else is those repeated experience of those positives and negatives contributed to eventually them having their own aesthetic experience. So those really positive biophilic innate connections, and then those fear connections, they were able to somehow, like, their mental shift into that aesthetic experience. So like for us at the land, you're at the land all the time, and so that accumulation of awesome. And then the hawk came up and said, hey, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the multiple exposure. So the 160-day contiguous experience, it could be valuable, but I think it needs to be repeated. It's just like you got to have a constant relationship with your spouse in order to build that relationship. Just like nature, you got to have that. It's the same exact thing. You got to have repeated exposure. You got to take the good with the bad, right? And in order to build a more a bigger, deeper appreciation, a love for that thing.
And I think what's kind of cool is afterwards, so after everybody came back, everybody transformed their lives in some way. The person who transformed it the smallest, so he had done the Appalachian Trail and he was kind of a big dude, and he lost a ton of weight. And so he cleaned out his closet. So, I mean, that's a small thing, but he actually cleaned out some stuff. And so that was one way that he was able to transform his life a little bit. Other people totally reorganized their lives. We had a couple of people take new jobs based on it, in nature based on it. So one of
Fukuoka, he quit his job.
So the park ranger that we interviewed, he wasn't a park ranger then, and he had this job opportunity, but it was a little, it wasn't necessarily where he thought he would go. But after he did his big hike, he realized this is what the job that I need. Another person, the researcher who was researching the Pacific, she also took a job with a research job I can't name where, but took a research job where she was more connected with nature after that experience was over. Other people reorganized their lives and moved. So we had people move to places that were easier to get to or backed up to places they could go hiking. A lot of people re-educated others. So we had one of the ocean rowers who said, okay, this is my passion. I'm going to start educating others, as did the professor we talked about earlier, Professor X, to educate others. So people change their lives in different ways to maintain that connection and regain that connection, which I find interesting. And that's where it connects to you and I, because we're talking about building out Sayura. And we like to get down there and we want to move down there and be more connected to nature ourselves. And so that's how we're reorganizing our lives to do that.
Some property that we own.
Oh, sorry.
Some land.
Was I not supposed to say that?
No. It's just nobody knows what the heck you're talking about.
Oh, well, I'm talking to you. And yeah.
But I think that ties really well with biocultural evolution.
Yeah.
It's the idea that whatever affinity you have for nature, you pass that on to future generations in your genes. And to your culture and to the society around you. And that's another interest. I think that's a really important thing in how we preserve nature. The biocultural evolution, the more and more people who have a biophilia aesthetic, response to nature, the more prolific society is going to be towards protecting it. Right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the key. That's one of the big important aspects of this dissertation and the whole concept. I struggle with how that actually works, though, because my parents love to camp. They love to be. They loved campers. They loved being out in nature, especially my mom. So I have that appreciation as well to a certain degree. I like being outside. I like watching the campfire and stuff. I don't like sleeping in a tent necessarily with coyotes and stuff running around, but Bigfoot or whatever. But my sister doesn't. She does not like to camp whatsoever. I got at least one daughter who doesn't like to either, and that's interesting to me. Like, what happened? Like, we both had the same parents, the same experiences, but she doesn't want anything to do with being outside. I love being outside. Like, so how my understanding of how that is transmitted from parents to kids to society is incomplete somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a great follow-on study. The longitudinal study. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, but that I think is really, really important for society to survive. How do we pass on a great appreciation for the interconnectedness of nature and our relationship to it and our appreciation of it?
Absolutely.
And how do we preserve that fabric of life?
Yes, agreed.
Anything else you want to say about your dissertation?
No, I love the fact that you read it. That was so meaningful. So
thank you. I loved it too. I'm really glad. Now is the time to read it, not before we were married, definitely, and not while you were working on it. This is the perfect time. So I love it, and I'm very proud to have my own copy. So thank you. I wrote in it, dog-eared it.